Now, one of the things that's fascinating is that when you look at the Tower of Babel and you look at the kingdom, in the Old Testament, the kingdom is imaged by the tabernacle. And in the tabernacle, you have a thing called a watcher tree. So the symbolism of the lampstand seems to be that it's symbolic of an almond tree, which in Hebrew is a watcher tree. And it's called a watcher tree because almonds look like eyes. And you have at the top of that, you have, of course, the lamps that have fire on them, and fire obviously allows us to see. And the symbolism seems to involve the Spirit of God watching over things. And that Spirit of God is manifest in leadership. So the idea is that at each level of a hierarchy, you have a leader, and the leader's job is to watch over what's beneath him. In fact, you have elders being called what?
Overseers.
Overseers, right? Because you're supposed to see over. And so in a regular hierarchy, there's always a problem of distance, and especially in a human hierarchy. Human hierarchies are notorious for having a lack of information that then does not serve the bottom of the hierarchy well. It only serves the top. So one of the things you can think about is the Soviet Union and how there was bread lines everywhere. And there were bread lines everywhere because they wanted to manage the economy from Moscow, and there was no way that they could know what was going on in all these places and how much bread was needed in all these places. And so they sent what they thought they needed, and it was never right. So if you go into Cuba, for example, I've seen video of a Cuban grocery store, and you'll have a whole bunch of like one product. Like they'll have cans of chocolate milk, and they'll have a whole aisle full of the same brand, same size, same everything, chocolate milk. But then there won't be any meat, or there won't be any bread, or there won't be, that's the way that it works, because you have these people who don't really know what's going on because they can't. It's too much for them to know, and they can't know, and they're trying to serve the hierarchy, but they only care about serving that hierarchy to the extent that that's their reason for existence. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's not like they really care that much about what's going on. The picture of a hierarchy that actually runs according to God and His Spirit is that the Spirit inhabits the leaders, and that then they look at the hierarchy, and that in looking at the hierarchy, they actually respond to the needs of the hierarchy. And one of the things that's fascinating about that is that it's a spiritual thing, and yet it also involves people. Now, you have all these levels of the hierarchy, and you have, for instance, you have God instituting governments. You have governments that institute maybe governors. You have all those different levels, and then you have families, and all of those things are supposed to be watching out for the things that are below them. Now, in your experience, does that work really well?
The more immediate,
right,
the better it works. But like you said, the more remote,
yeah.
Uriah's been sick for the last couple of days. I haven't had anybody from the federal government calling me to find out what they can do.
Right. When we look at this, the thing that might be instructive for us to think about is how much of that is a lack of care or concern, and how much of that is a lack of ability. What's your take on that from the standpoint of functioning hierarchies? Do you think that ability or concern is usually the problem?
But I'm going to go with care and concern.
Yeah, I would agree. And one of the things that is if we look at how the Soviet Union functioned, Was there an alternative that the Soviet Union could have used?
Well, there was.
And so the question for us is, why didn't they use it? Why did they want to control the economy from where they were at? Because what was the alternative? The alternative was capitalist system where really nobody's in charge of it. There's a pricing. Pricing is what allows the system to function, but nobody's really in control of that. So why? But it works. It's interesting. There's something really powerful about the way that the pricing system works. And in fact, there was a Soviet leader who came over to visit NASA, and I think it was Gorbachev who came over to visit NASA, and as he was just driving, they were driving in I think it was Florida. He wanted to go to a grocery store just to see, and it was just a random one that happened to be driving by. So it couldn't have been a state like for show like they had in the Soviet Union. And when he went into the grocery store, he knew that they were going to lose the Cold War because he saw it stocked with amazing things that not the best, the highest people in the government of Russia could get. And anybody could walk into any store and get that. And he couldn't believe how well stocked it was. He couldn't believe how well the American system worked. It worked because there was something immaterial, a system that wasn't physical, a system that wasn't controlled by any one person, that was actually doing a better job than all their planners could do. Now, knowing that, why would the Soviets use the system that they did?
I can think of why it was initially put in place, but as far as why keep it, and it still was there to essentially serve the desires and wishes of the people at the top.
Yeah, right. And so because power, right? This system allows us to concentrate power in our hands versus one that doesn't. And if you care more about your own power than you care about meeting the needs of the people, then you keep a system that doesn't work because it meets your desires. And that's kind of the idea of the hierarchy, is when people are influenced by the Spirit of God, whether something does something good for them or not, if it does something good for what they're responsible for, that's the decision that they'll make. And the fascinating thing is that actually works. It actually works. You go into the part of the world where people really actually do what's best for the people beneath them and don't care about whether they get the accolades. They don't care about the power. They don't care about those things. And you'll find systems that actually bless people. However, when the people at the top care about themselves and are rebelling against the hierarchy, what you find is disintegration. What you find is a system where nobody is better off.
One thing that comes to mind is in this fallen world that we live in, there's always corruption, but in a system that's very compartmentalized, that corruption isn't going to have the same dramatic effect it's going to have in a system where the power is very centralized. You get corruption there, and it's all corrupt through and through.
Right, and it's because at every level, people make the same decision. It's fascinating. I was reading about Afghanistan, and it fell faster than people were prepared for. And looking back at why did it fall, and it fell because there was corruption at every single level of the government. Every group made deals and switched sides and made deals. And in fact, I was watching a documentary about the fall of Kandahar, and all the soldiers were rushing to get on these planes that were leaving Kandahar because the guy who was in charge of Kandahar made a deal to give up the city, and knowing that once it fell, that Kabul was not far behind, but he made a deal. He gets money, and so at every single level, the president left the country with $165 million, I think, of taxpayer money, American taxpayer money. But at every level, there's corruption. At every level, somebody's saying, oh, I'm going to do what's in my best interest versus what's in the people below me's best interest. And so it never works. Well, I think that about wraps it up for this section of our look at the Tower of Babel story.